It's tempting to call Godzilla Kong: The New Empire a surprise hit, but it's really only a surprise if you haven't been paying attention. Here's why the monster mash crushed the box office. In its opening weekend, Godzilla Kong eviscerated its modest $50 million studio projections to bring in $80 million at the domestic box office. This is far and away the best opening weekend for a MonsterVerse film since 2014's Godzilla. By 2024 standards, it's topped every single opening weekend so far except for Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2, which made $82 million in its first weekend. If you count Easter Monday, though, Godzilla Kong trounced even Dune, claiming the crown with $87.7 million. Godzilla Kong also stomped all over the fleeting box office king Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, racing right past its total domestic haul. Globally, Godzilla Kong made just over $202 million in its first week. While this number isn't necessarily something to roar at given its $135 million budget, it's obvious the film's success isn't being carried solely by overseas markets. Though Godzilla is a Japanese import, there's clearly still a massive appetite for kaiju stories in America as well. Godzilla Kong is sitting comfortably in third place on the current list of the top 10 highest-grossing films of the year, given that it also had a better domestic opening than Fast X, Wonka, Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, and Elemental, all of which netted spots on 2023's top 10 list. It's probably safe to say Godzilla Kong is a lock for this year's final 10 highest earners. Discount DVD bins are littered with failed cinematic universes that attempted to follow in the footsteps of the MCU, and it's all too easy to overlook that the MonsterVerse is arguably the most successful to steal this storytelling strategy. The DCEU, for example, got stuck in a place where people mainly compared it to Marvel's successes, both critically and commercially. Though the MonsterVerse has yet to reach the same peaks as either Marvel or DC, it has managed to maintain and slowly grow a universe with a sound continuity and relatively consistent characters and aesthetic. All of this is to say that Godzilla Kong had the unique benefit to being part of a larger franchise, as well as being able to confidently offer audiences a story that would uphold the integrity of what has been produced in the MonsterVerse thus far. This franchise as a whole projects confidence and clarity, and that's pretty refreshing among today's cinematic universes.
That's not just a signal. That's a call for war.
Of course, for anything to be a true cinematic universe these days, it has to include a slightly unnecessary prestige streaming series that simultaneously claims to be vital to the overarching narrative while also being deliberately ignorable. And even though the Apple TV Plus MonsterVerse series Monarch: Legacy of Monsters is both of those things, it happens to be pretty darn good. So good, it has the highest Rotten Tomatoes score of anything the franchise has produced to date. It's hard to say whether or not it would have hurt Godzilla Kong if Monarch had been panned by critics and viewers. As a consequence of its warm reception, however, the MonsterVerse got a solid 2 months of favorable press through mid-January, just a month before Warner Bros. And Legendary would kick off the marketing push for Godzilla Kong in earnest with a second trailer. So what if Monarch isn't vital to the overarching narrative of the series, and who cares if it adds more than a few wrinkles to the MonsterVerse timeline? At the very least, it helped create the momentum needed for Godzilla Kong to succeed to the extent that it did.
Here's our ride. Come on, let's go.
Warner Bros. Ruffled more than a few feathers when it made the controversial decision to release its 2021 slate of films on the streaming service now known as Max. There were valid concerns about how the movie might undermine the struggling theater industry and compromise the creative visions of those who made these movies possible in the first place. Yet, although Godzilla vs. Kong was made available on the streamer for all subscribers at no additional cost, the film still managed to generate an impressive $48.5 million in its first 5 days in theaters, a pandemic record according to Variety. Now, it seems clear that this pandemic-defying performance provided the MonsterVerse specifically with at least one unique benefit. Audiences were still up to date on the series. Plenty of franchise films managed to debut during the pandemic with similar or identical release strategies, but failed to make the same impact as Godzilla vs. Kong. In Godzilla Kong's case, it seems as though the fan base was as active as ever during the pandemic. Perhaps even more so, given they started a grassroots Twitter campaign to urge the studios to make another film. The hashtag #ContinueTheMonsterVerse began trending in April 2021, and even Legendary Pictures tweeted about it. It's probably at least a little due to the fan campaign that Godzilla and Kong got to reunite. What about those who didn't keep up with the MonsterVerse during the pandemic? Not all audiences are attached to Godzilla as a character, but there's a chance that some people were converted by the 2023 sleeper hit Godzilla Minus One. Aside from blowing everyone away at the box office and surpassing Bong Joon-ho's Parasites as the third highest grossing non-English film in America, it also targeted a slightly different moviegoing audience than the MonsterVerse films. While the MonsterVerse has the aesthetics, tone, and scale of a typical American blockbuster, Godzilla Minus One is quieter and starkly pensive. In other words, it's not the sort of movie for those who just want to see a giant monster cause unimaginable havoc, though it does have plenty of that to offer. As such, it stands to reason that some audiences who had no interest in kaiju flicks but took a chance on Godzilla Minus One because of the positive word of mouth might have left the theater understanding why people love these films. You don't need to see every Godzilla film in order to see Godzilla Kong, but the award-winning Godzilla Minus One might have allowed some people to connect with Godzilla who had never seen a kaiju film before. Subsequently, these newly converted fans may have decided to take a chance on Godzilla Kong as well, particularly as ads for the new American film often played before the subtitled Japanese one. With endless casting announcements and overstuffed trailers, it often feels like big-budget movies don't have any surprise reveals to offer anymore. On the other hand, the films in the MonsterVerse largely choose to play their cards closer to the chest than their competitors, even keeping iconic villains under wrap as much as possible. The first trailers of the 2014 Godzilla were memorable for how little they showed of the titular monster, instead focusing on the haunting reactions from bystanders and the harrowing consequences of his power. They also didn't reveal the film's secondary antagonist, a strategy the distributor employed again to even greater effect for Godzilla vs. Kong. Ticket buyers familiar with the series were likely excited to see if there were any similar reveals in store in Godzilla Kong. That expectation also likely influenced many fans' decision to see the movie in the first weekend, to avoid having any surprises spoiled for them. Godzilla Kong is a rare bird at the cinema. And no, it's not just because it features monkeys and monsters fighting side by side. The early months of 2024 have been predictably sleepy in terms of studio output. Apart from Dune Part 2, the buzziest releases of the year so far have been the likes of Argylle, Madame Web, and the Mean Girls musical remake. And, as we mentioned above, the stiffest competition Godzilla is facing at the moment is the lackluster Ghostbusters Frozen Empire.
Heads up! It's all dark and horny at 12 o'clock.
With both Dune and now Godzilla Kong, it feels as though we're finally moving out of the dump months and getting into the films that studios are actually excited about releasing. It certainly doesn't hurt that the particularly flashy opening weekend of Dune Part 2 might have shocked some adult moviegoers out of their winter slumber by getting them back into the routine of going to the theater every once in a while. In this case, Godzilla Kong was arguably the only film poised to capture their attention right now, and it benefited from both the jumpstart from Dune and the current lack of competition. Trailers have a major impact on a film's immediate commercial viability, and a studio can't expect numbers like Godzilla Kong unless it has the marketing to back it up, which is precisely what Godzilla Kong had. From sweeping location shots that show off the film's visual tone and scale to the haunting music, the first trailer for Godzilla Kong perfectly captures the energy that fans watch these films to experience. Dread, majesty, triumph. It's all there. These early trailers also maintained a sense of mystery by teasing plot points and characters rather than explaining or showing them outright. Again, in an age where it's all too common that audiences know virtually everything about a major studio release before going into the theater, it's genuinely inspiring to see Warner Bros. And Legendary Entertainment take a more subtle approach with two of the least subtle characters in cinema. Up until this point, one of the major drawbacks of the MonsterVerse films, particularly those featuring Godzilla, was the dark, hazy visual style. From posters to trailers to entire scenes in the final cut of the films, the most common image one would conjure up from these movies is the vague shape of Godzilla, bathed in mottled light and almost entirely obscured by clouds, smoke, or fog. This style may have been effective back in 2014, but after 3 movies with this character, audiences are probably getting a bit bored of the same visual tropes being used over and over again. It seems the creative team was thinking along the same lines, as the vibrant visual palettes of Kong's Skull Island and the splashes of color used sparingly in Godzilla vs. Kong have now been allowed to spread throughout Godzilla Kong. Both the trailers and the posters stood out as strikingly vibrant compared to those used for previous Godzilla installments. This apparent desire for color might even explain some of the film's redesigns, like why Godzilla is now pink, or why Kong has a bright yellow gauntlet, or why Godzilla is now pink.
We've made some minor augmentations.
Oh.
With this new liberal use of daylight and bright colors, Godzilla and Kong feel rejuvenated from a visual perspective. It almost seems as though this represents the studio asserting both characters as blockbuster heroes rather than opaque figures of destruction, which, if you ignore the obvious thematic drawbacks of doing that, is a decent way to breathe new life into the franchise. We're 10 years into the MonsterVerse at this point, and none of the films in the franchise have managed to crack a score of 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. Godzilla Kong specifically was revealed to have a lower score of 62% ahead of its official release, before quickly falling to a rotten score in the 50s over the course of its opening weekend. For any other film, this lukewarm reception might have dampened audience excitement and negatively influenced some viewers' decision to buy tickets, but Godzilla Kong isn't any other film. At this point, fans of the MonsterVerse aren't expecting critical acclaim before a release. These are CGI-reliant spectacles that will score in the high 70s on a good day and deliver exactly what fans hope to see. From the fans' perspective, it doesn't matter if seasoned movie critics assess that the narrative doesn't hold up or that the human characters fall flat. These movies aren't really meant to be showcases of drama. Perhaps this franchise will find the limits of its audience's appetite for unbalanced action. Until then, as long as the MonsterVerse promises fans the go-for-broke spectacle they expect, poor reviews are unlikely to affect its definitive box office dominance.